Show is coming to you live from the Multi-TV studios. This is your Joy News channel. Also live on Joy 99.7 FM, Love FM in Kumasi, and over a dozen affiliate stations across the country. You may be watching us right now in London or elsewhere in Europe on your ABN television Sky channel 290. The show is also live at myjoyonline.com and multitvworld/streams. As always, the show is your most authoritative news analysis show. That is an unshaking statement that I make all the time, right? And on this show, we put Ghana first, indeed. I've got some of my guests in. Of course, Abdul Malik Kubaku Jr., who is a regular panelist, is also within the house. I've seen his bags of documents have been brought into the studio, but not his person. So let me quickly introduce to you who I have in the studio. I have the privilege of hosting today on this show, and particularly for the very sensitive issue of the pensions that we are going to be discussing, the Labour Relations Minister, Haruna Idrisu. He's also MP. Good morning and welcome to the show, sir. Great. We also have Kweku Kwarteng, his MP for Boise, and you must have heard him very vocal on issues of public interest. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Godwin Adawine is a private legal practitioner and also teaches law. Good morning and welcome, sir.
Good morning.
All right. Abdul Malik Kubaku Jr. is in the studio. He will join us just in a minute. Now, as I've already announced to you, the issues we are looking at the pensions questioning, or the pensions fight that's been ongoing for a while now. Now, the new revelation to the developments. How does it affect the whole situation? As we know, the 12 labor unions that are striking have been compelled by a court order to suspend the strike. They have accordingly complied, but they have issued a threat that they are likely to get back, resume the strike if matters are not resolved within the shortest possible time. The last time I checked, the order that was granted by the court, injunction against them, would have expired yesterday or so. So as we speak, if they wanted to carry through their threat from Monday, they could decide not to get back into the to work. But is that the way to go? So we're going to find out what the new twist brings to the whole discussion. The new twist is that some 270 million Ghana cedis of the Tier 2 pension contributions have not been transferred into the Bank of Ghana account, temporary fund account, which is a mandatory requirement by law. What does that mean? So that's the first issue we are looking at. We'll get into Parliament, look at the unsworn Speaker who has assumed the acting presidency. Has he committed treason as is being suggested? We'll find out what the law is about that also. And very finally, you know, they have bought some chairs, very new chairs from China, and there are some woodworkers who say, hell no, that is very bad. And in fact, it goes against the president's, you know, promise of made in Ghana goods, that campaign. It just spoils it. We'll look at all of that and why the GFA is being ordered to surrender the entire amount of $8 million that they got from the World Cup participation to Chest instead of only the 4.3 million that they took from government as loan. Kweku, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great. So, gentlemen, I'd like to start with you first, Mr. Kwarteng. Now, when you read, and this is a report that's been submitted to Parliament, and Parliament is going to go through it, and that is what, you know, Joy FM was able to intercept and began to serialize it. When you hear that such an amount that ought to have been transferred has not been transferred, how does it make you feel?
Well, my immediate impression then is that government should get out of second-tier pension and not infest it with government's traditional inability to transfer even statutory funds when they should. And I've had the occasion to make the point that what is happening in respect of the second-tier pension funds for government workers is not different from the way government has handled levies, dedicated levies that government has collected and is required by law to put into specific accounts for specific purposes. Example, the National Health Insurance Levy. It is a levy we pay directly. It is expected that within 30 days, government would transfer this into the National Health Insurance Fund for health delivery. Government, as I speak, is in arrears of something in the neighborhood of 12 months. And you see that it is this bad, respectfully, this bad habit of government that we are seeing in the case of the second-tier pension funds for government workers. And I keep stressing government workers because I'm sure as the program goes on, we need to look at the second tier for private workers, for government workers. And I think that in order that we will save government from its own self, we just should not allow government to handle second-tier pension funds. And if you ask me what it makes me feel that the case of the workers, that they should be in control of their own second tier, is a legitimate one, and we should all put pressure on the government to do that immediately.
Well, these monies, as we know, the Tier 2 pension contributions, that is the 5% that is taken directly from the worker's salary. What we know is that because of the transitional period of the new law, they were supposed to be deducted by employers. Now, if you do not make the deductions, you face a sanction for violating the law. Sure. You could get into jail for, the last time I calculated, it should be about 24,000 or so Ghana cedis, or you could get about 3 months in jail, or is it 2 years or so in jail. What do you think should be happening upon the discovery that this is a mandatory transfer that ought to have been made? That's the law. That's what the law says. That there ought to be a mandatory transfer within 90 days, correct?
Within 2 weeks.
Okay.
After collection.
No, I'm talking about the money when it is after being collected and it's having to be transferred. That's what I'm talking about. Now, when you find that there's a breach of that law, what are you expecting?
Well, if you look at Section 64 of Act 766, it states clearly what the remedies should be. Because, you see, these funds are supposed to be invested for the benefit of the workers. So if you're a government and you hold it, and on this occasion we are talking about government not transferring what it should have transferred as far back as 2012, 2 solid years. If government had done that, the money...
This is between May 2012 and September 2014.
Exactly. There's been some few months within that period in which government has transferred, but the arrears as of October 2014 was 269 million. I'm assuming that by now we should be looking at about 300 million because government has still not transferred any funds between August and now. And if you look at Section 64 of Act 766, the National Pensions Act, it recommends, it prescribes what ought to be done if it didn't happen. And there are penalties for the employer, and there are remedies for workers. And I was explaining that if that money had been paid, even according to the NPRA, the money would have been put into into treasury bills and government bonds. So it would have yielded something for the benefit of workers. Now that government didn't transfer that money, the question we should be asking is the NPRA in a position to enforce those provisions against government? And again, the reasons come up why government should get out of this second-tier pension, because it creates all kinds of complications. So if you ask about the sanctions, yes, there are sanctions for employers, but on this occasion, I doubt it very much that those sanctions will apply. All it means is that workers would lose out simply because government has refused to do what it ought to be doing.
Now, when these reports come before you in Parliament, and as I read the report, I actually, in my introduction, made a little quotation from the report. The very final bits of the report states very clearly that the pensions industry is a cash cow. And that's what the NPR is saying. It's a cash cow and ought to be nourished so that it can play its rightful role in the economy. So to the extent that these monies have not been duly transferred so that they can be invested, the sort of nourishment that they are talking about, they themselves, are caught. They haven't done that.
Yeah, there's a broader economic management issue here. When the NPRA says it's a cash cow, all they're saying is that these are savings that could be invested to generate economic activity, create jobs, and therefore it's a cash cow. Let's put it that way. Now, if government fails to transmit these funds where they ought to go, then you're keeping that money within government expenditure, which, as we increasingly are beginning to see, is recurrent expenditure. Now, the question is that if, as a nation, our workers were making savings that could be invested, generate economic activity, generate profit so that they themselves can have more comfortable pension, and by government's conduct, we're keeping the money in public sector recurrent expenditure, then it also hurts the economy in a way that it wouldn't if government was doing the right thing. I think in all this, government ought to be asking, given that this money, the beneficiaries are pensioners, Section 63(9) says there should be insurance of these funds. So government's weak point about, oh, I want to guarantee, is a very, very, for me, respectfully, it's a disingenuous way of holding on to a position that is not tenable. And I say that because, you see, there are...
A position that's not tenable, that government is the best guarantor? Is that what
yes, government can't guarantee. In fact, when the communications...
No, look at it in terms of government being the best protector of funds that are supposed to go to anybody.
How could government do that? The point is that these trustees, and in this case, Pension Alliance Fund, Alliance Trust, it's a private entity. It is going to engage its own fund managers. If they go bankrupt, the question is that, is government in a position to take taxpayers' money and use it to satisfy an obligation that a private player should have satisfied? Will it not be tantamount to taking public money and giving it to that private player? That is why the law itself says these funds have to be insured, and the insurer has to be registered with the National Insurance Commission. These are the safeguards. And let's not forget, there are private workers who also have second-tier pension. Those private workers have engaged their own trustees. If we were to accept government's weak and almost dishonest explanation that I'm the one to guarantee it, if we were to accept it, the question is, would government do that for just use the taxpayers' money to bail out government workers if their second-tier pension fund managers go into bankruptcy, but will not do same for private people simply because I had no hand in the way you chose your trustees? The reason the law is silent on who ought to appoint trustees for government workers, in the case of private workers, it is clear that the workers will do their own thing, and that is what has been happening. In the case of government workers, government is saying that, here, I will do it. I think that the motivation, and on this occasion, I speak not just of this administration, but politicians have a tendency to want to do this because if you had somebody there, the person's motivation, if we agree that it should be appointed by government, the person's motivation is to satisfy the ruling party. if I finance your campaign, even if I didn't manage the funds well, you probably will keep me there. The beneficiary workers, who are the, as far as I'm concerned, the fund owners, will not be in a position to control you because really they can sack you. We have given that burden to government. And the motivation of a trustee that is appointed by government to manage the pension funds of workers would feel obligated towards government rather than the workers. And the tendency, as we have seen, will be for the man to say, if I can put a little money in their campaign, then they will keep me here. And it wouldn't matter whether they are doing that to the satisfaction of the workers or not. If I can land on this, if it was done by the workers, the law allows a change, that you can change your fund managers, you can change your trustees. If it was done by workers, then whichever trustee is appointed would now look at the workers, listen to them, because if I didn't, they will fire me. Okay. Then the efficiencies of competition would have brought the benefits that workers could get.
Right. Now, some information that we haven't had in the period have been revealed through the report that has gone to Parliament. The corporate trustees that have been licensed to so operate, the corporate trustees, we have a list of 25 of them that have been so registered or licensed by the MPRA, also registered to operate as pension fund managers. You have a total of 56 entities that have registered to operate as fund managers. And the very final part about the custodians, you have those who have also been registered to operate as pension fund custodians. You have 16 of them. They include EcoBank, Standard Chartered, Stanbic, Cal Bank, Agricultural Bank, HFC Bank, Prudential Bank. So the custodians are virtually a good number of the banks with good name in the country. And also there have been some schemes that have been registered as well. Now, Kweku, some of the workers are suggesting that this revelation is a clear vindication of their position all along, that they cannot trust government, they cannot trust the NPRA because they suspect that their monies are being used for something else.
Well, you know, the timing of this report, of course, would reinforce that kind of belief that the workers have, the way, manner, the report, the content of the report came out, the circumstances, the arguments, the debates, and all those things that have been happening. So when you put it in that context, I'm not surprised that the workers would come out with that kind of statement. And it's difficult not to sometimes, you know, appreciate their concerns, because governments, and we're dealing with this government, so the emphasis is on this government. But otherwise, there's a historical perspective to that, that many governments in our history have had that tendency where, you know, they treated the SSNIT, going back, SSNIT was treated as if it was a second central bank and almost always relied on SSNIT for all sorts of projects or all sorts of dole-outs to cure certain mischief here and there. It's part of the reason why all this idea of three-tier contributory system coming in, so that you realize that government is in the state more or less are dealing with the tier one with much control there, whilst tier two, the idea, the philosophy is to make the workers get a sense of ownership and participation. So it's within this context that this argument is taking place. But you see, I've been doing a little research and I've intercepted also some few documents. I haven't finished yet, so I have to be cautious and I present my case. But this mischief that the report to the parliamentary committee shows, it's not a new thing. It's not new. I have realized that it's been going on for a while, but there's a cure to it. What I've realized here is this: all those outstanding amounts, maybe I should go official, I should look at it. Yes. I intercepted this document just like Joy intercepted the report. This is dated July 9th, 2012. It's from the National Pensions Regulatory Authority to the acting director, Debt Management Division, Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. And it illustrates the situation in which we are and the possible cure. It says modalities for the payment of outstanding contributions and accrued interest of public sector workers for 2010 to 2012. This follows from our discussion on Friday, 6 July 2012 with the Acting Director of Debt Management Division of the Ministry of Finance.
And again, you say this is a letter from...
Signed from the NPRA, signed by Mr. R. Kwame Asante, then board chairman.
And this is supposed to go to who?
To the Acting Director, Debt Management Division.
Okay.
But it's copied to the Minister, the Chief Director, the Director of Budget, the Controller and Account. The date is 9th July 2012.
Okay.
And it says this follows from our discussion on Friday, 6 July 2012 with the Acting Director of Debt Management of the Ministry of Finance and the Chairman of NPRA. It was agreed that the cutoff date should now be June 12 to enable the bonds to be issued effective 1st July 2012. I forward the attached for your attention and also to inform the Honorable Minister of Finance about the balances for 2010, 2011, and 2012. This supersedes our letter of June 26, 2012, addressed originally to the Honorable Minister. 2010 outstanding balance. A. Balance as at 30th June 2012, amounting to 73.6 million, for which 1-year bond should be issued with effect from 1st July 2012 with maturity at 30th June 2013. The coupon rate is agreed at 21% per annum. 2011 outstanding balance. Balance as at 30th June 2012 amounting to 72.5 million, for which a 2-year bond is to be issued with effect from 1st July 2012 with maturity at 30th June 2014. The coupon rate is agreed at 22% per annum. Outstanding balance. Balance as at 30th June 2012 amounting to 37.2 million, for which a 1-year bond should be issued with effect from 1st July 2012 with maturity at 30th June 2013. The coupon rate is agreed at 22% per annum. Government of Ghana to give an undertaking and pay the outstanding amounts from April 2012 and to remain current. Any delayed payments would also accrue interest, and consequently will attract the appropriate interest rate. We are also, by a copy of this letter, informing the Director of Budget, Minister of Finance, and the Controller and Accountant General to ensure the payment of the 2010 outstanding balance, which is now determined at 73.6 million, as this is the preferred option for the NPRA and the contributors. Then I realized that 10 days later, a letter from the Minister of Finance, then Dr. Kobna Dufo, and that I should read that too for relevance.
Okay.
It says 19 July 2012, conversion of modalities for the payment of outstanding contributions and accrued interest of public sector workers for 2010 to 2012 to government stock. As part of government's efforts to clear its outstanding contributions to the National Pensions Regulatory Authority, government has decided to issue 3 stock certificates to NPRA with a total face value of 183.3, I'm just cutting that short, 3.3 million Ghana cedis. It would be appreciated if you can print the stock certificates with details as follows. 1-year stock certificate with a face value of 73.6 million at a coupon rate of 21% per annum, effective 1st July 2012 and redeemable June 30th, 2013. 1-year stock certificate with a face value of 37.2 million at a coupon rate of 21% per annum, effective 1st July 2012 and redeemable June 30, 2013. Then 2-year stock certificate with a face value of 72.5 million at a coupon rate of 22% per annum, effective 1st July 2012 and redeemable June 30, 2014. The coupons will be paid semi-annually until the final maturity date. The stock certificate is not transferable or negotiable. The certificate should be signed by the Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Planning and the Chief Executive of the National Pensions Regulatory Authority. This was addressed to the Governor of the Bank of Ghana.
Okay.
So there's a cure to the mischief. One would have wished the mischief didn't even occur in the first place, because these are deductions being made, so that if the deductions are made, in accordance with the law, they ought to have been transferred to where it should be. But it looks as if the kind of system we run, even the 14-day thing, I have the evidence here that this money has been paid, the 183 has been paid. I have the Bank of Ghana thing here. But you see, it looks as if even the 14-day thing, we hardly meet it. When it's January, let's take for example, the January contributions. You're supposed to then send it maybe February 14th, if you realize.
Right. But
sometimes the checks I've done, the tracking, I realize that it even goes into March 5th, March 7th. I still am not able to understand that bureaucratic inertia that creates that situation. That is something we have to take another critical look at. Having said all this, you know, I'm doing another research and I realized that the private sector outstandings are mind-boggling. So to the workers, I tell them both, the public sector as well as the private sector, in terms of contributions, this phenomenon of outstanding, or if you like, non-payment or non-compliance with the law in its strict terms, is cutting across the divide. And because it's pension, you see, when it comes to talking of pension funds, I think we are looking at a very serious matter.
That's right.
Goes beyond the politics of the situation, but it's our lives that is at stake. After 40 years of contribution to public service or private service employment, this is what you are going home with. And that is why I think we have to take another critical look at this matter. But the monies that government haven't paid, if they had paid, would have been better. But if they hadn't paid, there's a cure. You target it with an interest, and they pay eventually.
Okay. Now, so very, very interesting.
Can I throw in a few quick
I was actually going to ask you.
Sure.
I was actually going to ask you for a minute. You know, a point that having listened to Kweku and the letters that he has read, how do you situate this report that is coming to Parliament now? Have you had a change of mind as to its status
at all,
and its effect?
No, at all. And this approach is even unsustainable. Pension funds are not supposed to be invested into treasury bills. You must have trustees and fund managers who do real investment.
But you know that the law provides that within the transitional period.
The permanent cure.
I know,
good. What I read here.
Yes, so I'm responding to, in the long term, this is my solution at all. You see, if they went to trustees, trustees and fund managers, they would invest the money properly. We have a transition. So we have a temporary account into which this money must go. It is the reason NPRA, that appears to be investing the money right now, says it would be better, instead of keeping the money there, to buy treasury bills and government bonds. So immediately we go past this transition period and fund managers are really having to invest. Government cannot force the trustees and their fund managers that, well, if you had the money, you probably would do housing investments. But you don't have the money, so by force, I'm imposing treasury bill investments on you. So this approach is unsustainable. It's a temporary response to a difficulty
in the context of the transition.
Okay.
So that I'm suggesting that within the context of the transition, yes, it's a cure.
Right.
But not a long-term cure.
Okay.
It ought not to happen. We ought to have a situation where we could have been smooth sailing with how this law says things should be done.
Right.
But we don't have it, but no money is missing or lost because there is a cure.
Okay.
That's the point I'm making.
Now, Haruna, is this not also part of the reason Labour is unhappy? There's not been sufficient information flow for them to properly appreciate the situation. And I'm saying this with the benefit of what Kweku has just done, with the documents that he has intercepted.
First of all, I'm surprised at your effort in describing this information as intercepted information. This is public news. The NPRA held a press conference and they sought to share with the Ghanaian public details of the management, in particular of the second-tier pension scheme and matters associated thereon. So therefore, in my view, he shared how much, and Kweku has raised very significant point that I thought that my colleague member of parliament with a finance background ought to have done. that one, it is not unusual and it is not extraordinary for government to be in arrears.
That is wrong. It's wrong.
I say it is not unusual and it is not something out of the extraordinary.
Armed robbery is not unusual.
Go back to 2008, your budget statement. You were in arrears huge. District Assembly Common.
Okay, sorry.
Wait.
Now you know what.
District Assembly Common Fund.
If you stop interrupting him, we can keep the focus.
And get fund and others.
So let's move away from that point.
So
come back to
I
this.
said that it is not unusual because of what Kweku said, but to sum it up, of some fiscal challenges. But this is a matter to which government is processing and reconciling, which are also stated publicly on the same network, Joy FM. I indicated that the MPRA will come public with details. Remember, at the time, I had even mentioned 400. The relationship was Haruna's figure versus Fifi Kwete figure when I was dealing with just public sector workers. And Kweku has raised another significant matter, which I thought my colleague should have addressed. In talking second-tier pension, you're not just talking about public sector workers. There is also those above 45 years in the private sector who are making a significant, colossal contribution. And indeed, of the 2 billion, over 2 billion Ghana cedis so far declared by the MPRA, a chunk of it is also dedicated to that private sector workers. Now the problem. In the last 4 years, following the passage of Act 766, there's been a tango between government and organized labor, that is a forum, as to the governance structure as to who should manage the second-tier pension. I'm mindful of the fact that this matter is before court, and I may not be able to make certain pronouncements, but rather just to respond to some of this issue. So it is not an interception. Government just sought to share information with the public. And also for your information, Labour is well represented on the MPRA board by 2 representatives. And therefore, the communication that Kwame Asante signed to the Ministry of Finance, they are apprised of it with many other details. So nobody should create an impression that organized labor or the forum does not know the happenings in terms of what has been paid and what has not been paid. And that leads me to the third point, which Kweku also said. Government can at any time issue bonds. And I'll just give you an example. At the time that I came public with 447 million, that was what government had committed in terms of payment into the public sector fund. By the following week, it had increased to 547. So 269 or 79 million to government is not a matter which should let you give in. I think that for 4 years, the matter has been who must know. I say 4 years. 2008, the act came in, and there's no perfect model of a better managed pension scheme in the world. The best, as I have read, is that of Norway, followed by the Dutch. And even then, there are sometimes that government relate to the fund for other fiscal measures. So I thought that my colleague should know. And 2, arrears of statutory payment is not peculiarly NDC. It's peculiarly a challenge. Oh, I'm making a point. If you want to deny it factually, it's not peculiarly NDC. If you want to bring all your budget from 2004 and 2008, just to caution you that government being in arrears with its statutory obligation knows no party color or partisanship. And I think Kweku has also raised a very significant point, that in discussing pensions is a very complex and delicate matter that touches the heart of persons who are vulnerable, incapacitated, in their very trying and difficult moments in life, that we ought not to fail them as to when they come to require that this is the 300 or 400 I want. And let me just define it. The second-tier pension is contribution plus investment, less administrative expenses. That's what we call the lump sum. So I agree with you that there is a first tier which is being managed by SSNIT, and there is a second tier to which we are in harmony with labor, that it must be privately managed. How is privately managed is part of the reason why government is in court, to seek statutory interpretation as to who has the right to appoint who, or who has the right to play what role. We'll leave it to an independent arbiter, because for 4 years, I inherited this. I've been Minister for Employment in the last 90 days. I have not given any subject my attention more than second-tier pension. I've held more than 8-10 meetings with labor, both formal and informal. But what is instructive, which all of us have missed, is that January is approaching and there will be some persons who will be qualified for the lump sum. I made a pledge, and I recall you referencing it in some of your public discussion of this, that government guarantees to grandfather the payment of that lump sum. Labour was quick to ask that, how are you going to determine it? What calculation are you going to use on that basis? But the important thing is that we ought to resolve this matter timeously. And let me state, without fear of contradiction, that strikes and demonstration will not resolve this matter. If in the last 4 years we've seen May Day celebration, this has been an issue for which compel government to seek an independent arbiter to have an appreciation. And something also to reference you, I've heard you publicly. I was one of the first to come public to say that government appreciates the fact that some amendment to the Pension Act, Act 766, was necessary and compelling, and that once Parliament was back, I will seek an amendment through Cabinet and Parliament to deal with those unanswered issues, including inputs from labor. So therefore, we admit that the law since 2008, for instance, even the age and matters of past credit are things that we ought to deal with. And for the record, I'm aware that the Trade Union Congress have itself recommended some amendment to this provision. So I thought that I should bring that home. My colleague also...
I want you to make a direct point here.
Yes.
To the viewer and the listener.
Yes.
Who has heard in the course of the week.
Yes.
That an amount of some 270 million
I'll deal with it.
ought to have been transferred.
Yes.
Which has not been transferred. The labor unions that are on strike, some say this is a clear vindication that they have genuine concerns. What do you say about that now?
Yes, I thought you probably didn't hear me. I said that it's been processed, subject to reconciliation by the Minister of Finance, the Controlling Accountant General, the MPRA, and then SSNIT. Some of it is transferred straight to controller by SSNIT on behalf of the private sector workers. Government undertakes to honor that commitment to that fund. And maybe give me an opportunity to explain. There is, as Kweku said, the temporal pension fund account.
Right.
And this is the challenge. So all of us have not even dealt with the issue. In the absence of an acceptable governance structure to manage the second-tier pension scheme, it was agreed that this temporary pension fund account be operated by the Bank of Ghana, to which money accruing its interest and investment is paid into that account. Disbursement from the temporary pension fund account will necessarily take off as soon as this governance challenge is over, as to who has the right to appoint who has done the right thing legally, and who has not done the right thing. So I've heard him talk about investment.
It was agreed that this money should be put in the temporary fund account.
Yes.
You are referring to the law and not as if people coming together to agree.
Absolutely.
Because that is section 218.
Absolutely. That is agreeable that there must be a temporary pension fund account, and I believe that if you read it further, you see the 90 days limit.
Correct.
In that particular provision. So the money is there. The Bank of Ghana temporary, and sometimes I wonder why people speak with double tongue. Earlier on, when I heard some of my colleagues in the opposite side, they said that even including some leadership of Labour, had said that the money was invested at 2%. It was when we came forward and said, no, it's been invested in treasury bills, and at prevailing treasury bills rate, the tongue has changed that you ought not to have invested it in treasury bills. Very interesting. Oh, I say the tongue have changed. I've heard public argument. At the time, the argument was that we had invested it at 2%. No, indeed, in one of the meetings with organized labor, I held a copy of the Bank of Ghana letter to me and showed them that this was for instance, the question you asked, I said, look, this so much has accrued. This is the treasury bill interest rate. I have asked the MPRA to study the document and come public. So at least it's been a stimulating debate on second-tier pension. And I think that my appeal to Labour is that strikes or demonstration will not solve this problem. We ought to sit and dialogue further, make improvement in our respective positions. I've seen Labour take a particular position. 4 schemes must manage this money. That has been their position in the last 4 years. Not negotiable, not helpful, and not healthy for negotiation. Government too has held on to a particular position, to which I've said that maybe to reach out with Labour, government will have to review its position in order to engage Labour. We may be meeting on Monday. I believe I've sent out some invitation letters so that we take it from there. But Samson, appreciate why government needed to seek a statutory interpretation, because all the two, call them the two elephants. Labour have taken a position. We're right in appointing our fund managers and custodians and establishing a scheme. We went through due process with the national MPRA. Government says appointed person Alliance Trust because the law required that it must be privately managed. I did so as employer. And the workers too say we have a certain relationship
because the law says that it's an employer-sponsored scheme.
Absolutely. So you see some representatives. Absolutely.
Appointment
so I just thought that is why an independent judgment on the matter was absolutely compelling for government. But we can reach out to it.
Okay.
No, I have one final point, I beg you, so that I can just respond. When I hear my colleague reduce the discussion on pension to campaign and campaign financing, I don't intend to treat it as a trifle, but my heart bleeds because, and to be fair, I've heard the lead opposition figure of our country, Nana Addo Dankwa, on this particular matter, make a public comment that government was not handling the matter well. He failed to appreciate and he failed to share with the Ghanaian people what he would do as president of the republic. What opposition means is constructive alternative.
But
let Nana Addo, I'm saying that for the opposition, let him go further and provide better particulars, how he intends to manage this as president of the Republic of Ghana in the likely or unlikely event. I think that his comments was inadequate and insufficient, and I'm hearing same. He ought to share with the Ghanaian people so that they know an alternative, that this government believes in employee. Don't say
what
so.
Did Nana Addo say? What did Nana Addo say that is new? He said his party is extremely worried about the opaque manner in which the issues were being handled, and that this is not the best way to go about it.
So share what his alternative is, how this ought to be managed by government, and what he will
follow
do
the
as
law.
president.
That's what he means.
No, which law? That is why we are in court. We are following the law. Where there is dispute, which is a forum to go to, you go to an independent arbiter, which is the court. And I think all of us must resolve. I think that they should call off strikes and demonstrations, but both government and labor must see to an expeditious decision on this matter to guide the way forward.
Now, Godwin,
and disease from the threats.
Godwin, after you have heard from, everybody else, do you have a feeling? And I asked Haruna whether he thought that it wasn't a case of they not putting out sufficient information to assist to avoid what we are seeing now. And Nana Addo says it is being handled in an opaque manner, and that's leading to all of this. He seems to have such information that when you hear, you are tempted to ask, so what exactly is the problem?
Well, there are two issues. One has to do with the disputes about who has the right to appoint the private sector operators. And I think that dispute resulted in the strike action and then also the court action.
Correct.
Good. On that, I don't know what information that could have been provided than what already was in the public domain. That is to say, the law makes provisions for this matter, but very silent on who the person to appoint is. In the absence of that, an activity had to be performed. And whoever is to perform the activity will perform it in accordance with his understanding of the law as it exists at the time. In this case, government decides that its understanding of the law is that it has to appoint because it is a government-sponsored scheme. Well, there's opposition to it. The matter is in court, and likely the issue will be resolved. Then we'll know what the position of the law is, And on that basis, we will not evaluate the conduct of the parties relative to the law. But the second issue that has to do with the non-payment of the outstanding collections, maybe that is where the information gap is. Now, in the course of the week, I mean, getting to the latter part of the week, I heard some labor union leaders making the point that they have been vindicated. But I thought that their agitations related to the issue of who has the right to appoint. At the time, the issue of the outstanding amount didn't come up, at least I didn't hear it as being one of the factors. So it's something that has come much, late in the day, although very important also.
You're accusing them of shifting positions.
Well, I haven't said so, but those are just the facts that up to the latter part of this week, this was the position. And from Thursday, Friday, this is another position. But even if they had this in mind, I did not hear them expressly push that as part of their point. But be that as it is, we still can concede that the information now being provided did not previously exist, at least, or maybe the media didn't give it that kind of prominence which it ought to have had, thereby creating confusion as to how government is managing the situation, whether it is taking steps to transfer the money, it is taking steps to preserve it, and all of that didn't come up.
There are those who say that the labor leaders may have an alternative, an ulterior motive in doing what they are doing now, because like the minister said, they are represented by not one, but two persons on the MPRA board, and that they have been part of, you know, discussions and everything that goes on. So they ought to know.
That is a fair point to make. That's a fair point to make. And that raises the issue of how fair we sometimes can be to the generality of the public. I cannot understand what factors prohibited representatives of labor from discussing matters that they were aware of that were relevant to the existing dispute. But I do not also know whether they in fact have that piece of information. But it's not only labor and government, but I think the media too has a role to play. I believe that some of the information comes to you, you said, through interception or through some other means, howsoever you may call that. But when you get hold of such information, how do you process it and then transmit it for everybody to understand and to use? So transparency is very important. You
intercept a report from the MPRA that is going to Parliament, and it makes an admission of non-transfer of an amount of 270 million thereabouts.
Fair point.
Between May of 2012 and September of 2014.
Yes.
And you put it out.
Well, I think that the report will have mentioned certain other actors. Maybe the Pension Authority, maybe the Ministry of Labor Relations, or maybe the Ministry of Finance. And I thought that their direct response could also have been useful for public consumption. But the general point is that, as we have all agreed, pension is such an important thing, and that in treating it, we need to look at the real issues and discuss them dispassionately. Now, there is no guarantee that if private sector arrangements are allowed to manage these funds, workers' welfare can be 100% guaranteed, because we have seen instances of private arrangement failing and calls being made on government or the state to intervene and then provide a bailout. So with these facts, I thought that the parties will be very open and then provide all the honest information that they may have to a discussion of the issues. We are told that even in the private sector, employers have collected the monies and not transmitted. We should also be interested in that, because the private sector workers are as important as public sector workers. So that while the heat is on government in relation to public sector workers, I thought that we should also pay attention to the plight of the private sector workers as well.
Right. Now, we now have some of the unions now saying that they are going to demand an independent audit because of the manner in which the figures have been brought forth. They're going to demand an independent audit so that they can know the clear situation. What do you say to that?
I'm sure I can answer that for him. He's not representing government. We welcome it, that independent audit. Indeed, like I indicated, at every time, there is this reconciliation which goes on between SSNIT, the Controller Accountant General's Office, the Bank of Ghana, and the Ministry of Finance. In fact, I can go public.
You're saying that you admit that the audit that has been done by PricewaterhouseCoopers is not sufficient? Because that audit was just concluded on the 31st of October.
You asked a first question. I thought that, like I said, even before Pricewater had to come in, it was the MPRA board with their representative who took the decision. There are recommendations. In fact, there is another aspect, Michael Cohen, who has a contract with MPRA representing the Swiss government. He's also come up with a number of recommendations, including the review of the law, strategic plan, and strengthening the capacity of MPRA. I'm simply answering the question you posed to my colleague, who does not belong internally within government, that government is open. I'm sorry I'm interjecting. If you saw a report to Parliament, that's where the representatives of the people are. The MPRA owe Parliament sincere and accurate information, which they went and shared with them, and which is form the basis of this discussion. Government at any time is prepared to work with labor, and I think that Kweku raised it. Let me emphasize it. Whatever amount is outstanding, government undertakes to grandfather and pay it, and to pay any accruing and deserving interest on that amount.
It's the matter, doesn't it?
Yes, a fair point. Because I think at the end of the day, it's not a means, but workers want to know what exactly the figure is. And if these processes...
What I mean is his very last statement. That government, undertakes to pay every dime, that not a dime will be lost, including what ought to have accrued.
Yes, and I think that is the essence of all of this, that what we are entitled to at a particular point in time is guaranteed. And I think that's fair.
Okay. And
that is law. So if government will not comply with law, I don't know what an undertaking will do. I mean, if I can go on quickly and make my point.
Yes, you're speaking about the law. Are you also aware that, for example, according to the law, the MPRA is allowed, if it feels that it's going to default within the period of the transfer of the funds, to be able to issue some circular, and that circular represents, a lawful way to explain the gap, the inability to transfer at a certain point, so that they are not caught by the mandatory, stipulation of the 19 days and 90 days and on.
Well, that is fair. That is okay. I mean, it's different from a situation where the law says government or somebody must do something. The person is just not doing it. And we're saying there should be an undertaking that I will now do it. The law is the law.
They're talking about circumstances. It's not as if it is deliberately done. And the law also recognizes some of these circumstances, not only a situation of a force majeure.
That's okay. Sounds really, be it an undertaking or the law, I just think that we should do the right thing.
Okay, so what's the point you're in a hurry to point out?
A couple of points, quickly. First, let's steer this discussion away from MPP and DC. When I spoke, I'm coming. When I spoke, I spoke about government. If government is doing something wrong, we ought to point it out. Even when I made a point about campaign financing, I was suggesting that if you leave government to be appointing the trustee, and I think I mentioned that not necessarily just this administration, but if we allow that arrangement to stay, trustees for public sector second-tier funds...
Samson, point out to him that is the law. Read section 129, read section 211, privately managed, so it cannot be government. We are respecting the law. That's why we are in court.
Would you keep quiet and listen to me a bit and let me pick something from it? What I'm saying is that if we allow an arrangement in which it's government that appoints the trustee, then the obligations of the trustee appears to be towards government. And therefore, whether this administration or future administrations, they will have greater motivation to be financing the campaign of the ruling government as a way of keeping themselves in the job rather than mentioning managing the pensions well for the workers. So I was not really talking about MPP and DC, and okay. I think Aruna has a tendency to.
So again, what you're saying now is that government's interpretation of the law is wrong, and he's saying that is why the matter has been put before a court.
That is okay, but I'm not even addressing the law. I am talking. He is talking about. You are
talking about where government does the appointment of the corporate trustee.
Whether by law or not, I don't think the law supports that. But even if the
Section 1B, read it for him. Samson, we are here. The public is listening. Read Section 1B of the law. Let me just help you.
All right.
Because we want to have an informed discussion. There is established by this Act a contributory three-tier pension scheme consisting of A mandatory basic national social security scheme, that's SSNIT. Then hear this for your purpose of the analysis you are making. A mandatory, fully funded and privately managed occupational pension scheme. The emphasis might privately managed.
You see, you're just getting in the way. Keep quiet and listen to me.
Okay, I'll keep quiet.
What I'm saying is this, that tier one is government. And that is where the law has made all those elaborate arrangements SSNIT. Tier 2 is privately managed, and you read it yourself. I'm saying that if in the private management of the funds, it is government that would appoint the trustee, then the trustee has a tendency to want to please the ruling government rather than workers in managing that. It has nothing to do with the law you read.
Okay. Now quickly. Now see, they say this is the understanding, that as far as the law goes in section 129 and 211, this is an employer-sponsored scheme. Government says, I am the employer of public sector workers, and the law says this is an employer-sponsored scheme. So I feel that I have to do the appointment of the one who does the management.
As a trustee.
Again, where the argument comes up is that when you read section 141 and 142, it empowers the employees to have at least to constitute at least 1/3 of the membership of the board of trustees. There are those who make the argument that it is the board that begins the whole process. So it ought to be the board that will do the appointment of the corporate trustee. That is where you are
custodians.
Government has appointed a trustee. You are saying that on the board of that trustee, the workers have reps. Does it give them the power to change the trustee? These are all, in my opinion, respectful opinion, dishonest arguments being put out there to give government legitimacy in appointing trustees for second tier. I think it's completely unhelpful.
So you're happy about the suit?
Absolutely.
You're happy about the
suit? I think government should get out. The government has no point going to court. It should just get out and allow the workers to manage their funds. That's what I think. Quickly. Now, Kwaku made some point about the delays and that it cuts across public sector and private sector. Let's not go away with the impression that we're dealing with the same problems here. If you look at SSNIT getting mixed up in second tier, they shouldn't. The law does not appoint them as the trustees for second tier for private workers. The reason that has happened, and they explained it to the committee when they came, is that give all the money to SSNIT and let SSNIT transfer the second tier, which they are not supposed to manage, to the trustees for the private workers. Now, SSNIT, if you look at the records, SSNIT has done that. The arrears we have is June 2014, the last quarter, to September 2013. SSNIT's real point now is that if they are going to have to manage the second tier for private workers, then they ought to be paid. That's what SSNIT is saying, that if they will not be paid for this service, because the law does not say they should manage second tier, they will not be paid for this service, then they are not going to do it. So SSNIT is in a hurry to run away from this. And the arrears we are seeing is the last quarter, June 2014 to September 2014, it seems to me, when this report was put together.
Right.
I don't think we have sufficient evidence that the private second-tier pension is suffering the same problem as government's inability to transfer these second tier for public sectors from as far back as 2012. They are different issues. Now, quickly, the bonds. I've been looking at the documents Kuku passed, and it is true that these amounts are paid. But I'm not sure he meant that. I stand for his correction. These are not bonds government has purchased to offset the outstanding figure that the NPRA quoted. In fact, when the NPRA came to Finance Committee last week, they said this 26.
You see, you have a problem.
Kweku, 100
and you are speaking about.
I was not talking about this
not
one.
today.
So I was showing a
That's
trend.
why we asked him to read the date. I think we have a right of reply to him now.
But if I can finish,
So
if I can finish.
That's why I've allowed it.
Yes, if I can finish.
No.
No, I think you allow.
I'll be decent. I'll ask you to keep quiet. Something will allow you.
Okay, that's okay. What I'm saying is that the 269, as we speak, is still outstanding. The bonds that the government sold out for those funds, they are the part of what should have been paid since the beginning of this arrangement that I've paid. I didn't think Kweku meant that I'm making the point that let not anybody go away with the impression that the 269 yeah, exactly, has been paid. And in fact, that is as of August, this 269 is as of August 2014. I've already made a point that we probably are looking about 300 now. And more importantly, listen to this.
Finish in 1 minute.
The amount of 269 million stated above is also without interest on delayed contribution and on paid contributions. So the question about when you delay, the returns on that, which workers lose if the money, which they would not have lost if the money was paid early, that matter has still not been resolved. And I don't know where the remedies for that are. My last point. There's something strange about the government arrears, the arrears from the Controller and Accountant General. You see, the arrears are May and July 2012. Somehow, they paid up to June. Then they left May. And then July, June was paid. They left July. And then they paid the rest of 2012. You get to 2013. They paid January to July. And then August to September, they did not pay. Then they paid January 2014. And from February 2014 to now, they have not paid. The question is that, why are there these specific gaps? Did government, if you have...
What's your suspicion?
My suspicion is that probably they did not intend to pay this.
They did not intend to pay.
Yes,
okay.
I suspect so. The government did not intend to pay
a very final point from you in 30 seconds. The workers are still threatening that they may resume this strike. Do you feel that's the way to go?
I am very reluctant to suggest strike action to anybody. But I feel very strongly that government's stubbornness in forcing itself onto second-tier pension funds for public sector workers is completely unreasonable.
Should they resume the strike? That's the question.
You say, I've made a point that it's not for me to tell Labour whether they should
or they should not.
I'm coming. My point to government...
Members of Parliament are saying that you are going to intervene to stop if they intend to.
Yes, if there's intervention, my contribution would be that, yes, we will not encourage the workers to go on strike, but government must just do the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
and
Samson, just to...
let me start with Kweku.
Okay.
I'd like you to wrap it up.
For the avoidance of doubt, the documents I read and the point I was trying to make had nothing to do with the outstanding thing. I was just trying to illustrate the point that it's not new, it's not an unusual thing. There is a feature, and in spite of all that, there's also a certain cure because of the fact that the letters I read showed that NPRA and government had come to a certain arrangement that you pay those outstanding at an interest of so and so and so. So that was to make the point. But ideally, I would prefer a situation where that didn't arise. And I think I made that clear. Because these are deductions we are making. I don't see why we can't meet the law. Even if the 14 days is difficult to meet, an extra 1 week, we should be able to meet that thing. And I am also told that the 183 million plus had been paid.
Okay. What will be your reaction if they resume the strike tomorrow, on Monday?
I'll blame government.
You blame government?
Yeah, government has been a bit intransigent over this matter. Last week I said here, they displayed bad faith when they went on their blind side to go for that injunction and the rest.
But it is lawful to go for an ex parte injunction.
I have never questioned the legality. Never ever would I do that, because it's true, the court processes allow that. But you see, when you're building confidence, when you are in that kind of intricate, delicate situation of an industrial agitation, more or less you appeal to the people's hearts and minds, and you build confidence.
But what do you do when you're appealing and they are not listening? They have one point and they say we will not move.
No, there are certain things government too hasn't done over a certain period, which has reinforced that kind of mistrust.
They say
that workers
they
have.
say the way forward we see
Four
is to have the
skills.
court to make the determination.
But was that the reason why the workers went on strike? There had been some processes before. A lot of things hadn't happened. As we indicated here, lack of transparency. No, it's true. I believe so.
Okay.
Information flow was weak. There was hardly any transparency. People were asking questions, some of which could have been answered much earlier in a detailed form. Those things didn't happen. Look, you are dealing with the human being. And when information flow is weak or totally absent, you get such situations. So to be honest with you, as we agreed last week, let both sides come to the negotiating table. I appealed. I said that if the workers rejected the court order, it would be wrong. And I was happy when I heard them say that they had abandoned it in accordance with the law. But as you indicated, it's only about 8 days.
Well, in fact, they didn't have an option.
Yes, but it was good.
The leaders would have been held for contempt.
Yes, but I was asking you last week how it was going to be enforced anyway.
They would have enforced it against the leaders.
Jail them.
Yes, I remember how Napoleon Poe was put behind bars.
No, you're talking of one person.
It was one leader.
Yes,
for that
one
group.
leader. But in this case, look at the scope. And you jail all of them. What do? You deepen the crisis. Look, that's not the way forward.
Okay. Fortunately, we haven't gotten there. Now, your last bit on this. If you woke up on Monday and you heard the workers announce that we are going back.
Over what?
Over resuming the strike, because they are threatening. They say they may resume the strike.
No, we need to know the subject matter. Is it about who should appoint and who should not appoint the private trustees?
Well, obviously, they are expecting government to give in and say, look, leave it.
Yeah, but
we'll be the ones in charge.
I think both parties agree that the law is not clear on that.
No, they don't exactly agree that. They say, as far as they are concerned, it's their job.
No, that is how they have chosen to interpret the position of the law.
Right.
But I do not think that they are saying that reading the letter of the law, it is clear as to who should appoint.
They have two past directors or CEOs of the MPRA who support their view.
But those directors are not the law. So the point is that either they go in
from involving them in the appointment process.
Well, I think that
Government should not even be
Okay, gentlemen, please.
Yeah, I think that looking at the issue, there are only two ways: a negotiated settlement or a court determination. But the weakness with a negotiated settlement is how does that bring clarity to the law?
Okay.
So, I mean, in the absence of that, the absence of clarity, there will always be confusion.
So you say that the best forum they can have
It's for the
to
court.
ventilate their concerns is the courts.
Rightly so.
I suggest that in the court, they should counterclaim for everything that they are looking for. Now they are asking for independent audits. They can ask the court to make those orders, correct?
If they have a basis for such requests, they are free to do so.
Okay. They are supposed to have been receiving reports as workers who have made contributions. They are supposed to have received a government of Ghana bond certificate. I'm not sure all of these things have been done. So they can, in the courtroom, ask for all of this to be done.
You know, these are separate issues from the substantive issue of law regarding who should appoint or who should not appoint.
Well, they have been sued, so they can counterclaim.
That's so, but the point I simply want to make is that even with private sector arrangement relating to Provident Fund and all of that, you have instances of fund managers or other managers of those funds not living up to to those obligations. So there are critical, practical issues that we can resolve. But as a legal point, we can ask. As a point of law, if the agreement or the arrangement entitles them to that, and they're not getting, there's nothing stopping them from asking for those orders.
Okay.
Sandra,
All right, thank
quick
you.
one.
Now,
the private sector thing that I alluded to earlier, for a little clarification, I was looking at the angle where the employer is defaulting in sending the contributions to where it should go.
Okay.
And not that SSNIT is withholding.
when the employer defaults, the law is very clear.
Yes,
They will
but
suffer
that
the
was, I'm
consequence.
saying that area.
the law is clear.
Right. Okay, now.
Samson, at least thank you for the opportunity. And to my colleague, government's appreciation, understanding, and opinion on the law, privately managed, was construed as appointing Pension Alliance Trust as trustees. That Labour and the forum thinks that it is not legally right. Now, Labour's argument is that went through due process, Section
especially
211.
after NRA,
absolutely.
MPRA had,
Section 211,
had licensed the
and
other,
given them the scheme.
trustees that they had brought forward.
And what is significant, like I said, I'm mindful that the matter is in court. They did this jointly with some representative of employers. I'll share some document with you on that before I leave. Now, that is where the confusion is. And that's why I agree with my colleague, my senior at the law, that clarity on the law becomes compelling.
That point
because
you made.
Absolutely. Then two, SSNIT as a vehicle for collection of 5.5% and 18.5% is the most reliable and convenient vehicle. And let's not risk it. If today we want the schemes to run on their own and government says then collect your dues, there will be anarchy in its collection.
Well, SSNIT has the infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So reliable. I just want my colleague to appreciate why SSNIT is continuing and will continue to play a role.
Can you move on and share with us?
No.
Share with us the the documents that you wanted
Yes,
to.
I will. Then my final point: pensions as delicate and complex. We've had experiences. You can go to Chile, you can go to Spain, you can go to South Africa. Indeed, I use the Maxwell example. Very prosperous business person in
It's
Britain.
been used over a number of times
allow
on this
me
platform.
to use it. Allow me to use it. Then when pension fund management goes bust, who becomes your most reliable guarantor and security provider? My honest view is government, and not government as construed today as NDC government, but government construed as an institutional representative of the state, which in foreseeable future may be his government.
So is government guaranteeing pensions allowance?
That's what good. Those
so,
are
why
all,
can't you do it for others?
No, that is why we need clarity on the law as to whether that appointment puts government in a position as guarantor, and whether we could do.
But you'll admit, sir, that the law provides just too much sufficient protection.
Yes.
As far as the guarantee is concerned.
Yes.
But just too much of it. I find that to be even too tight.
And we have said that there's been risks with pension fund management, and there are experiences abroad.
And that experience is what must have informed this law.
I thought I was landing on a partnership. And I'm quoting you. You read a section where you said 1/3 must be representative of employees. Good. So it means that in whatever case, neither government nor labor can do it solo.
Okay. Can we move on?
Well established.
Can we move on
so,
to the very few things
you said you wanted. I said that I'll share some documentation.
You're still here on Newsfile on Joy 99.7 FM, Love 99.5 in Kumasi, and over a dozen affiliate stations across the country. Also, you're watching us live on your ABN channel. This is your Sky channel 290 in London and elsewhere in Europe. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. My guest, Abdul Malik Kwekubako Jr., Haruna Idrisu, is the Employment and Labour Relations Minister. Koku Kwating is MP for Boase, and also Godwin Adawene is a lawyer and a law lecturer. Your views and comments, some of them have come in. I'm going to share them with you right away. But yes, can we go to what
No, I've shared something with you, but not for this purpose.
Okay.
You can read it as an opinion.
I see.
Like I said, that's why
I
think that we all must come
I need
together.
to take my time to go through this document that you just handed me.
Yeah.
Right, so let's hear from Ibrahim Kopa in Tamale. He says the intercepted document clearly showed that the NDC government and her conspirational associates, such as the SSNIT and controller, have not been sincere with the poor Ghanaian worker. Atai Moro in Wellensi says the government's inability to transfer the money to the designated bank account at the Bank of Ghana goes to vindicate our position that government can't be trusted. We will use all legitimate means to get our demands met. Eja Adam says, I seriously do not understand why government is bent on imposing a pension alliance trust on the poor worker. Is there any fishy deal? If not, then government has no business doing business. Musa Abatua in Kumasi says there's something. I totally disagree with the Honorable Kweku Kwating's assertions that government cannot be trusted in terms of guaranteeing the Tier 2 pension scheme. I am a contributor, and I prefer government to be the custodian of my money than any private entity. Of course, again, we have to know the differences between the job of the corporate trustee and then the fund managers, as in the custodians and the fund managers. They are two different entities. Now, as Simon in Wale Wale says, what does it profit a country which fails to pay statutory payments such as DACF, BAT, that's District Assembly Common Fund, but furnishes its parliament? What a country of misplaced priorities. Sofo Yamusa in Kumbungu says the government is being dishonest to Ghanaian workers. This show of incompetence is almost reaching crescendo. As a worker, I am personally disappointed in the attitude of government. Okay, Mariwan Farouk in Tamale says that, do you know, you're asking me, do you know that the VRA, Bank of Ghana and SSNIT are allowed to manage their second-tier pension fund schemes? Okay, so what is stopping government from allowing same to happen elsewhere? And again, what has been made clear on that issue is that their monies they are not paid from the consolidated fund. I hope that makes a difference to you. Oliver Bamba in Salaga says, I'm happy the labor unions have heeded to the High Court to suspend their strike action and negotiate with government. But the government must also play its part of the negotiations so as not to make the unions embark on another strike. That's a good note on which we take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.